death and taxes. Lost in the death penalty debate, a lot of work on taxes. We'll have more on this episode of Grow. Coming up in this half hour, you may not get stuck in the mud at Husker Harbors Days this year. We'll explain. Plus, we take a closer look at country of origin labeling and the latest on the bird flu. Grow starts now. Walmart presses farmers to change their ways, but farmers are pressing back. That's our top story. Walmart is the nation's largest food retailer. It's urging suppliers to limit the use of antibiotics in livestock. They're also taking aim at sow gestation crates. It's part of an industry trend responding to consumer interest in where food comes from and how it's raised. Walmart says the new guidelines are not mandatory. The Humane Society of the United States calls it a game changer. We asked what you think. Grow viewer Bryce responded saying, quote, "It is a bad sign when we begin allowing society to set the norms of agriculture rather than letting science, research, and real farmers do their job of raising safe and healthy products." In other meat production news, the World Trade Organization rules against country of origin labeling. The Office of the U.S. Trade Representative said the WTO rejected a final U.S. appeal, deciding the country of origin labels put Canadian and Mexican livestock at a disadvantage. The Obama administration had already revised the labels to try to comply with WTO rules. The ruling is a victory for some in the U.S. meat industry, which has said the labels are burdensome. Research shows many consumers don't even pay attention to the labels. State Ag Director Greg Eybaugh reacts to the news saying, quote, "The WTO ruling opens the door for Canada and Mexico to place retaliatory tariffs on goods imported from the United States. As two of Nebraska's largest marketers, such action will negatively impact our agricultural sector, especially meats and feed products," end quotes. Farmers and ranchers who depend on the Ogallala aquifer may benefit from $6.5 million in funds. The USDA announced this week it will invest in projects in a handful of states with the goal of conserving water and expanding the life of the aquifer. Underlying 8 states, the Ogallala supports nearly 1/5 of U.S. wheat, corn, cotton, and cattle production. In Nebraska, NRCS will target $1.8 million towards portions of 3 natural resources districts to improve water quality and quantity. Producers located in the focus areas have until June 19th to apply for conservation funding. As the legislative session winds down, Governor Pete Ricketts says farmers should benefit from tax relief, even if it's not to the level he had hoped for. The governor had proposed lowering the taxable value of farmland. Lawmakers rejected that bill, but the final budget that passed this past week does include millions to fund other property tax relief, which will benefit farmers.
I think that folks in agriculture will benefit from the money going into the Property Tax Credit Relief Fund. It certainly doesn't mean that we're done with property tax relief, but this is a good start. And again, the budget came in where we're slowing that growth of government by nearly half. That's all good news for Nebraska taxpayers.
Ricketts said he will try again on farmland taxes. Another measure should provide some relief. A bill by Senator Mike Glore would allow farmers to exempt the first $10,000 worth of tangible property used in their operations. And livestock producers could benefit from a hotly contested bill that did end up passing in the legislature. LB 106 sets up a scoring system called a matrix that counties will have the option of using. It's designed to help them make zoning decisions. The original proposal would have made it mandatory. Senators objected, and it will now be a voluntary option for counties. Livestock producers say it's an important tool to make decisions on data, not emotions. Farmers who open their land to tourism could be shielded from lawsuits. Senator Ken Schill said he wants to promote rural tourism and give farmers and ranchers another revenue source without fear of lawsuits. The bill passed its final vote 46-0. It could apply to farm tours, hiking trails, bird watching, hayrack rides, and more. If you got stuck in the mud last year at Husker Harbors Days, they have some major upgrades underway. The visitor parking lot is being regraded, plus they are installing a gravel driving lane. The construction work should be complete in time for this September's show. They're also installing new drainage and retention ditches to control surface water. Organizers say they can't be weatherproof, but this puts them in a better position so they don't lose a day like they did last year. It's a trend we certainly don't like seeing, but it does appear farmers are starting off the year in weaker financial position than a year ago. The Federal Reserve Bank says farm income declined again in the first quarter because crop prices are relatively low while expenses are up. Corn prices were about 27% lower than a year ago. Wheat prices 30% lower. Low grain prices help improve profits for livestock producers, but when corn is selling for less than $4 a bushel, it's hard for farmers to break even. That report also shows lower crop prices in 2014 hurt the wallets of Nebraskans. Nebraska was the only state in the country where per capita personal income fell last year. In the neighboring states of Iowa and South Dakota, income increased less than 1%. It's been a month since the start of that devastating bird flu outbreak in Iowa. Claire Powell brings us up to date.
Harris Vaccine's approach is really to be, first defender of new viruses that come into this country.
Harris Vaccines does things differently than other traditional vaccine makers.
We've already put this type of technology into birds with flu genes, so we know it will work. But we need to show it exactly with this H5, this strain.
The company creates its vaccines here with Ceravax technology, a one-of-its-kind fast-track technique.
Every vaccine we make, no matter what it's for, is by the same process.
Researchers put an electronic gene sequence into a platform without ever needing the virus present, and they have the ability to make a vaccine in as few as 4 weeks. Dr. Harris says the H5 vaccine is developed and ready to be tested, but they're waiting for USDA approval.
We have experimental lots of vaccine that have been made, and we have requested from the government permission to evaluate the vaccine in the field.
And they've been through this before. Back in 2013, they field tested the PED vaccine before it was licensed. That didn't happen until a year later.
And it's really turned out to be successful, but it's taken quite a bit longer than we thought it would, mainly because we had to work with the regulatory authorities to gain approval for the approach that we use.
Then comes the question of how do you vaccinate millions of birds?
We have to inject our vaccine, but it can be injected into eggs, or it can be injected into day-old chicks, or it can be injected into mature birds.
From trade barriers to federal regulation, the already developed vaccine could be something that works, but may take a while to get the okay to go on the market.
It really is a tough decision for government officials right now. It is extremely difficult to know what to do.
When pop songs come on the radio and you can only remember the parodies you heard from YouTube, well, that's thanks to the Peterson Farm brothers, farming and they grow it.
Out here on the farm.
The Peterson Farm brothers brought their passion for agriculture to the stage in Broken Bow last week. They started doing parody videos about farming 3 years ago just to show their friends and family what their lives were really like on the family farm. Now they're YouTube sensations. While they may be poking fun, they are serious about advocating and advocating for the industry.
It's just a really cool industry to be a part of, this industry that's worldwide, that is taking care of these other beings and using them to provide products and food for other people. And I think that's something to really be proud of.
During that event, nearly 170 kids were taught the right way to raise livestock, good production practices, and keeping proper records. Organizers say it's important to emphasize these issues, especially since these kids are raising consumable products.
We want them to know the proper way to take care of those animals. They have that. It's essentially their responsibility to take care of their livestock, and that's what we try to stress.
This was the second year for that Animal Quality Assurance Youth Training Program. Up next, markets, and still to come, an app helping consumers make food choices.